anger management as a leader and in the workplace. This quote from Buddha says, "Anger is a punishment we give ourselves for someone else's mistake." It strikes me because it's so hard for us to understand that the power we offer to anger is mostly self destructive. Does it make it unpleasant for others to be around us when we're angry? Absolutely. Yet they have the chance and the choice to ignore or to move away from that anger. They don't have to accept it and be angry too, as do you. Each of us has this option. When you choose anger and when you choose to let anger fester, to wield it as punishment, you punish yourself first. I've been thinking a lot about places that I've worked and people that I've worked with recently. It has a big focus in my work right now. And I recall that I worked on a very small team for a large company where people yelled and screamed almost every day. I also worked in a company where leadership would hurl angry insults or abusive comments and complaints at you while you were trying to present to them in a team. They considered that constructive feedback. And so you don't think I'm pointing fingers at everybody else. I've also been known to lose my cool. When my team frustrated me, I would resort to sarcasm and impatience and prod them to do better. See, I've also worked on some really amazing teams. I've worked with wonderful, supportive people, and I want that for you, for each of us. I've been hearing a lot of people say to me that they haven't yet worked in a place that they actually enjoyed. And I'd like to help us change that. So, the reason that I've been thinking about these experiences is I'm looking at why is work miserable for some people? Why does it increasingly seem to be more miserable for most people? And the top things that are rising to the list so far have to do with emotional intelligence and your ability to regulate your own emotions, of which anger is right up there at the top. I came across a really interesting perspective in David R. Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. He shows a map of consciousness, which spreads emotions and attitudes and perceptions across a calibration of energy levels, ranging from the lowest around 20 to the highest of around 1,000. And the premise is that at the lower levels, you are surviving, you're living life without thriving and drawing the negative towards you. The higher up you reach in the map, you trend towards positive energies, you shift from taking to giving back, and you potentially eventually reach enlightenment. The baseline here, the minimum viable threshold for positivity and positive experience of energy, is at about 200. So, what really struck me as interesting is that anger, while it still is below that positive baseline threshold of 200, it falls high, rather high, on this scale of low energy items, if you will. If misery and shame and humiliation are at the lowest ranking of about 20, you still have to pass through guilt and apathy, grief and fear and desire before you reach anger at 150. And I thought, how could that be? Anger can be either constructive or destructive. So, for example, if your anger leads to social reform at social injustice, then that might be considered a positive outcome of anger. And in the workplace, for example, if you're angry about your work life, if you can use that, particularly if you can use that as a leader to help you and your team construct a better outcome, then it's also partially positive, right? So, as always, we start with leading yourself. You lead yourself through your own anger and let that ripple out and begin to impact other people that you lead at work. The key is to avoid being angry and letting the anger fester and impact you negatively, having it drive down your own energy and eroding the joy and impacting others around you negatively. Unfortunately, those examples that I gave you earlier from work, that's kind of where my anger fell. It was anger directed at my colleagues or received from leadership or lobbed towards the company that you work for, and it brings the whole vibe down. So, for example, when I got angry and used sarcasm with my team, it might have prodded them to fix something or do it better in the moment. But keep in mind that I also wielded influence over this team. So it likely wasn't me getting them to do better. It was a circumstance and the power that I held. Could I have achieved the same or better results with a different approach without using anger and sarcasm and negativity? Probably so. I think it would have been a better outcome for all of us. Effective leaders will use anger or the anger that they see on the team and bend it towards constructivism. What can we learn from this? How could we do something different or better? What can we discuss together? Where can we reduce frustration and get the impetus towards anger to be minimized? I think one of the reasons that we harp so much about communication and listening and emotional intelligence in leadership is that when you don't have it, you really are creating an environment that makes yourself and others miserable. When you don't have it, you can't help other people learn and develop. So there's this perpetual energy that grows and creeps in and destroys. Something else that has been showing up in my awareness is that leaders are angry at their teams for not meeting expectations. Yet when you drill into that, you find a lot of assumptions. Leaders haven't set expectations, they haven't held themselves or others accountable. And that creates a really strange environment with a lot of frustration and anger too. So I actually have a guide about this. I'll put a link to the PDF that you can download in the notes below this video. But if you want to learn more about how to get what you want at work and set the right expectations and hold people accountable, check out this guide. What are some other tools that as a leader you can use to deal with anger in the workplace? One, work on your emotional self-regulation. Daniel Goleman says it is essential for leaders to emotionally self-regulate because it helps you make thoughtful decisions and maintain calm in stressful situations. Also, take these 5 items and add them to your daily toolkit. Practice empathy. Try to understand the perspective of the person involved. Reframe the situation. Practice patience. Take time to process. Don't rush to conclusions. Practice self-reflection. What triggers anger in you? Where do you see it triggered with others around you based on things that you do or say with your team? Non-confrontational communication is something you can practice as well. Foster it so that you're able to talk to people about what's going on without pointing fingers or making people feel bad. You want to try to have the communication about problems or issues in the workplace in a positive way before people get angry. And then practice compassion, compassion for yourself as well as for others, because we all make mistakes and are misunderstood. Now, a big one for leaders, set the tone and model the behaviors you expect to see. So no yelling, no dismissive gestures or tone, no nagging and critical commentary. Your culture will either permit or resist negativity. Call it out. When someone's throwing a tantrum or behaving badly, disavow it. When someone behaves well, praise it. And by all means, name the anger. Say, I'm really angry that this happened. But regulate your voice and your actions and the consequences that come with the angry situation. Also look out for frustration. Frustration is a big precursor to anger in teams. So when your team feels overworked, unheard, unempowered, disrespected, or treated unfairly, you're leaning towards a combustible situation. So instead, proactively ask, what's making the team feel frustrated? Work towards collaborative solutions. Poke around and notice who's actually disrespected or treated unfairly on the team and make a stand. Find time and ways to seek out your quietest team members and get their perspective too. Just because they're quiet doesn't mean that they aren't feeling frustrated or angry. They're expressing it differently. Let's go back to that initial quote. Anger is the punishment we give ourselves for someone else's mistake. We allow ourselves to experience unnecessary emotional pain and stress, often in situations that we can't directly control. So choose to manage your anger in healthier ways. Understand, communicate, problem solve. Try to avoid the negative consequences that anger brings and instead focus on resolution and self regulation. Till next time, take care.